Welcome to the voices of transparency and excellence. We're not pivoting, the world is spinning, like a top. Let's stop, figure things out, get some answers. Come with us on this ride. Warm regards, Rick and Judi.
Welcome to our podcast series where we address topics impacting our campus and community. I'm Judi Clarke, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hi, I am Rick Gatteau, and today we're really excited to delve into just topics that have significant impact on our campus. And today we're going to look at some of the recent government executive orders that certainly have had an impact on our campuses nationwide, on topics such as mental health, well-being, both institutionally and individually. So today we're so excited to have two expert guests with us who are well-versed in these areas.
So we have with us two incredible thought leaders. We're really excited to hear from them. We have Julia Baer, a professor of management and organizational behavior and associate dean for faculty and research at the College of Business here at Stony Brook, as well as Smita Majumdar and Das, the executive director of counseling and psychological services, known as CAPS, and behavioral health. Welcome.
Yeah, so thanks both for being here. And so if I could start to jump right in. So Smita, we've worked together for a long time. Can you briefly tell us about the office that you work in and what's your role here at Stony Brook?
Thank you, Rick, for asking me that. And thank you for inviting me to this podcast. So as you mentioned, I'm the executive director of behavioral health. And a part of my role is to provide strategic leadership to enhance mental health services for all our CWIFs and also kind of address systematic challenges that we sometimes face, right? To make sure that the student health is still provided in the best optimal fashion. So I look at prevention, early intervention, treatment, referral to services, and also oversee Center for Prevention Outreach, as well as counseling and psychological services.
Wonderful. And we'll ask the question to Julia. Can you briefly tell us about your faculty expertise and your research and teaching efforts?
Yeah, sure. So thank you as well. It's wonderful to be here. So my field is called organizational behavior. So essentially, we study how people feel, think, and behave in organizations. And within that, I've spent a lot of my career researching gender and how to understand the gender gaps, leadership in organizations and pay. I've focused quite a bit on negotiation processes and the way in which gender differences in negotiation may also help to explain some of these broader gaps that we see and tend to be quite persistent.
Great. So Smita, I'm going to jump in with another question just to focus a little bit more on your work around mental health. And so obviously with the new administration, new federal government actions of the last couple of months have certainly impacted college campuses and many of our faculty, staff, and students. Amari, can you talk a bit about what steps we're taking to ensure we continue to support our community's mental health as a result of changes in federal legislation?
Thank you, Rick. So I want to start off with, as human beings, we are all undergoing a lot of change all the time. And the changes may be on the national level, as we are experiencing right now, familial level or personal level, but they're always happening. And a part of mental health is learning how to adapt to these changes and emotions that they bring along with it. So part of adapting is finding what our core values are and maintaining them. And that is what we are doing at present time. Our primary goal remains the well-being of our students and community members. That hasn't changed at all. While we adapt to these new guidelines, we are dedicated to ensure that the mental health services remain accessible, effective, and responsive to the evolving needs of our student and communities. At an executive level, we continuously assess the impact of these directives and advocate for necessary resources or modifications to best serve our wonderfully diverse student communities, while upholding our commitment to providing high-quality mental health support to all our CWIFs. And we've been doing that consistently for a long time right now.
Can you share a little bit too? Tell me more about when a student comes to visit a counselor in CAPS. What does that process look like? And have any examples related to particularly over the last couple of months of issues that students have identified as needing help with?
So our students, when they come to CAPS, they get an appointment right then and there, so they can choose the appointment they want to make. They also can call us and get an appointment on demand right away to see someone. So our appointment wait times is maximum a day or 2 days, right? When they come in, they sit with a counselor, and the first meeting, we call it the initial meeting, just to assess what their needs are, whether counseling is the right fit or they need something else. And a lot of students are coming in right now as usual with academic stress, because that's something that students already cope with, familial stress, or just stress about things going on, right? So the students come in, they get an appointment, they have the initial meeting, and based on that, we kind of work with the student collaboratively to decide what the treatment plan looks like. They're going to have a few counseling sessions. We also have introduced the episodic model of counseling, which basically means that you don't see a counselor every single week for years to come, because that's a model many students are used to. But also you come in when you need us. You come in, you see a counselor for a few days, you deal with whatever you're dealing with, and then you go out and you come back again whenever you need us. So that way you're connected to CAPS and you're connected to the services we provide. And there's no termination, there's no ending of counseling. It's always almost an evolving, rotating door. And that's one way we are kind of making sure we are present for our students whenever they need us.
And can I ask just one more question, just as a thought leader on the national level? What are you seeing over the last couple of months in terms of whether it's an undocumented or international or a student has concern about them being able to continue studying and then accessing mental health services? What are we seeing on the national level related to that kind of student support need?
I think at a national level, all counseling center directors and my co-partners are definitely worried. I mean, this is something that is challenging for many of our students, because they're not just worried about themselves, they're worried about their family, friends, their existence, their future. So there's a lot of things in question at this point of time. But what we kind of focus on with our students, like what is within our control at this point? What can be done? How can you adequately advocate for yourself? And what are the things you need to make sure that you have within your control? And then connecting them to different resources, whether on campus or off campus, and giving them the sense that there is a place on campus, or even our entire campus is there for them. And we're there to support them and be with them while they're going through these challenges.
Thank you.
So, Julia, that kind of brings us to organizational structures. And one of your expertise is around organizational behavior. So if you take each individual's kind of the forest in the tree, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the forest. Collectively, with some of the executive orders, we've looked at some of the downsizing related to different departments and how we uphold different policies and so on. And it has a major effect on the functionality, the effectiveness, and just feeling a level of productivity. So from your perspective, can you give us a little insight on what organizational culture may be right now as people are navigating some of the changes that are coming from these executive orders and directives?
Yeah, well, I think it's an extremely difficult time. I think that we know from decades of research, and this really relates to, I think, the points brought up about student stress, is that uncertainty, sense of a lack of control, ambiguity is extremely stressful. And we know that that's, really one of the greatest stressors for individuals. And so what we're seeing at an organizational level is again, tremendous amount of, ambiguity, I think, and sometimes bordering on chaos. And so that's, I think that's, again, it's a very difficult time for people. I think in principle, we all probably wouldn't disagree with the notion that, efficiency is good, right? Obviously, cutting down waste in organizations is good. I think, they're on the level of principle, there's actually quite a bit we can agree on. But I think the process has been extremely challenging. And, we also know from organizational behavior that sort of one of the cornerstones of well-functioning organizations, positive organizational culture, and motivation, quite honestly, is what we call organizational justice and fairness, right? So people need to believe that outcomes are fair in organizations, that the procedures used in organizations are fair, and that they're being treated with dignity and respect. And when we lose that sense of organizational justice, that's when we tend to see things like motivation, job satisfaction plummeting, and sort of the deterioration of organizational culture. So I think, the process aspects of things, are very challenging right now. I think in terms of, again, the various cuts, it's hard to sort of speak generally about them, right? I think, these agencies operate very differently. And, We take the Department of Education, for example. That's been a department that's actually been critiqued since its founding, so to speak. And most of education is actually controlled at the state and local levels. So sort of how that plays out versus things like HHS or other agencies, it's hard to know how this will unfold. But I do hope that we can keep the people in mind, right? At the end of the day, these are people's livelihoods. And again, while we all hope for efficiency, we all hope for the reduction of waste, I don't think any of us sort of walk around on a daily basis touting administrative bloat or anything like that. At the end of the day, these are people who do jobs, and their jobs also affect quite a few other people. So I hope there'll be some humanity kept in mind as well. And I hope that we can find a way to perhaps address principles that we actually perhaps agree on, but in a way that people view as humane and fair and just, because that matters as well for our organizations.
And you hit on some really great points. And one is kind of, what does it mean for that percent that has been directly affected and disenfranchised? But then you have those that are still in the organizations that you mentioned.
Right.
From an organizational strategy, particularly around organizational justice, I love the way that you brought that in. And
that is a very important
Right.
construct in organizational behavior, very well validated. Yeah.
So there's no book on this. So what exactly, when you think about executive top-down leadership right now, what are you putting in place for those that are remaining within the walls of these departments?
Yeah.
What are you doing to ensure that people feel heard, valued as you navigate some of the unintended outcomes related to the directives?
Well, I think your question points to the role of, these are exactly the types of situations in which we do need strong leaders. So we know that organizational change is difficult. People tend to resist organizational change, particularly if they don't view it as beneficial. And in cases of organizational change, it tends to be more effective when there is typically what we refer to as a transformational leader, meaning a leader about whom people feel positively and feel is supportive. So I think that that's going to. At this point, I don't have an answer to that question. I think the proof will be in the pudding.
Yeah.
Certainly, organizations abhor vacuums. So I think, given all of the ambiguity in terms of organizational structure right now, my guess is that leaders will emerge. And hopefully those leaders will emerge in a positive way so that those who, again, are remaining in our organizations, looking to rebuild the organizational structure. And there is going to be a lot of rebuilding, right? So if we dismantle certain departments, then there are going to be other departments that are going to take over certain functions. There's no question. And so my hope is that we will see leaders emerge in a positive way. And certainly people are going to need them. And let me just say, they're going to emerge one way or another, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll be constructive leaders, and we'll be able to come through this at a more positive place, let's say. I do think there's consensus that everybody wants that right now. Right. As much as we have sort of disagreement, I think we can all agree that we hope to get to a more positive place once the dust settles, so to speak.
And one final follow-up. How do we tell young people, and how do we convey to young people and quite frankly, current employees, that you can still excel and thrive in a flawed organization?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, let's face it, there's no perfect organization, right? There's no perfect organization. And I think if anything, COVID to a certain extent taught us that there are a lot of ways to manage organizations, right? We had pre-COVID, we had quite a bit of resistance to remote work, hybrid flexibility, and literally overnight, companies who said, that they could never operate this way, operated this way, right? And in fact, if we look at the data today, I was actually just listening to an interesting talk about this. In fact, we've sort of settled at a place where folks are hybrid and working about 25% of the time from home. Among the professions that hybrid is an option, we're really actually pretty stable at that 25% work from home, 75% in the office on aggregate. I think, to remind young people that there is no ideal workplace, there's no ideal organization, there's no ideal university for that matter. I think that can be sort of a tough pill to swallow. We're all sort of, I think if we can come with the mindset of we're doing the best we can. And I know from, the students I teach here at Stony Brook, I think they, for the most part, they're ambitious, they're hardworking, most of my students are working one part-time, if not two part-time jobs in addition to all that they do, as you mentioned, for their families. for their studies. And, I think they're gritty. They're gritty. They're ambitious. I think they'll come through this, I actually think, fairly well. I firmly believe that.
So I just one other question. I know it's fascinating talking about just this is a major disruptor, like using COVID as the example of this. I'm curious to know your thought on, for example, like the Department of Education and different views on whether it should be centralized under the federal level or at the state level.
Right.
But I'm wondering from a kind of organizational structure perspective and debate about that very issue, how do folks engage in a healthy debate about what I would view as in life we talk about efficiency, effectiveness, and whether things should be centralized or decentralized,
Right.
which is there are various viewpoints on that. But what does a healthy debate about that notion of centralized versus decentralized look like in your mind?
In terms of education specifically,
Yes.
or
If you want education or just even more broadly, if that.
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, I think historically in the United States, we've had, very strong views about decentralized systems, right? I mean, this goes back to even the founding of our country, right? We've had this constant tension between sort of what's done at the federal level, what's done at the state and local levels. Generally speaking, we've come out in terms of education that's primarily, again, controlled state and locally. But I think in terms of how to have a productive debate, I think I would go back to some of the basic concepts of negotiation and conflict management, right? So if we can frame issues, if we can frame what we're doing as problem solving, that I think that can be very helpful, right? So what is the problem we're trying to solve together as opposed to simply, this sort of in-group, out-group, us versus them mentality, which can be very appealing, right? It feels good to belong to an in-group, right? It can feel good to sort of have that identity and be surrounded by that. I get that. But I think at the end of the day, if we, for example, can reframe the issues so it's not just sort of, I'm for a centralized system, you're for a decentralized system, never the two shall meet, but what is the problem we're here to solve? The problem we're here to solve is that we want to have the best educational system possible for our children. And to be fair, if we look at the statistics, if we look at where we are in terms of test scores, they're not amazing, right? I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that we could be doing better. But I think, again, we always need to be bringing it back to that question of what problem are we trying to solve together? Because otherwise, when it sort of deteriorates again into this sort of us against us versus them, polarized, we're going to get nowhere. So that would be my response to that. Yeah.
So, Smita, it's interesting when you think about the reason that you would have healthy debate is because you want healthy debate. You want to learn. You want that empathetic listening because I really want to understand your perspective. Not for agreement and not to even have confrontation, but I really want to understand how you came to a particular conclusion or an action. How do you facilitate that?
I think the first part about wanting to understand is listening. And you said that, right? Listening means you have to hold your own emotions because most of the time in these debates, before you even finish answering or listening, you have an answer ready and you want to jump in and you have to educate. The problem with education is you're only doing it from your perspective. Listening is much more powerful. And for that, you need to regulate your emotions. For that, you need to have good control over your own internal sense of stability, right? So breathing exercises, getting into like the mindset that I'm here to listen and I'm here to adapt and I'm here because I'm not against you, but we're trying to solve a problem. These are essential skills that every student needs to learn from like middle school onwards, I would say elementary, better elementary. But again, how do we come and listen to each other? And I think that's where the training stays before jumping or making groups. Sometimes communities do help, right? Being in communities do help, like where Julia said. But again, being in a community that only thinks in one particular way can be dangerous because you're just in a black hole that's echoing what you want to do, or echo chamber. So again, listening, emotional regulation, being able to be present, knowing that this is not the end of the world. I think that's very important because we perceive fear in a way that we believe like we have to do something, act right now, otherwise everything ends. Almost having the long-term view, right? That it is going to be fair. It is going to be fine. We are going to overcome this if we can come together. I think coming together is the challenge.
Right, go ahead.
There's a mindset to that.
Yeah.
There's an actual mindset because I think if you're standing in the darkness, you can absolutely make that choice. But how do you facilitate a level of hope that there will be tomorrow? The sun will come up. There will be the other side of this issue. There will be an opportunity to navigate this. It's a level of hope. And so, how do you instill that level of hope in individuals that this feels so weighty to?
I think I would say people in communities have histories, and history is a great pointer to people have gone through difficult times and have emerged, to helping a young person understand the longer term perspective from a historical set of point as well as at the future. Also, if you need to access mental health care, you do need to access, because sometimes when you're in that space where everything seems dark and your all your decisions are emotion or fear based, then you've kind of moved into the space where it's really hard to kind of open up your vision because it's become so like narrowed at some point. So maybe getting professional help at that point of time is helpful. And again, connecting with people from different perspectives, different spaces does help you kind of hear stories about hope, hear stories about how people have emerged, and accessing different resources, either individually or in a group, might be beneficial. And then we fall back into what is our core values, right? What gives me purpose? What gives me a sense of belonging? And then doing a little bit more of that. But above all, taking care of yourself, because if you're in that dark place and you're not taking care of yourself, you're not eating, you're not sleeping well, you're not doing things for yourself, you just get down even further into the darker place. So I think hope is a mix of a multiple different things coming together to then help you. And again, the professional help is definitely something I would ask people to get to if they have ever seen themselves in a place where they don't think they can dig out.
I wonder too, Smita and Julia too, how do we, beyond looking from about hope and the values you mentioned, I think we're in an environment where there's so much polarization in our society. And one of the things that I know at Stony Brook, I think, and again, on the national level, we're trying to look at how do we engage in what I would view as healthy dialogue, debate, reasoned discussion on a topic, hearing other points of view. How do we encourage both on a student level, a faculty and staff level? How do we encourage that? I would view it what we consider a healthy dialogue where multiple perspectives are shared and that we can actually listen, as you mentioned, to what other points of view are on topics that might be very difficult for people and where there's a lot of disagreement.
I think a part of the polarization is when you demonize people. That's the easiest way to do, because when you demonize them, you don't have to listen to them. They're not good enough. They're not human enough for me to even listen to and engage with. How do you bring back the idea of humanity that Julia is talking about? Is like, we are sitting across each other. We are all trying to do the best we can, right? And also something to really keep in mind, because we perceive people to be at more extreme than they truly are. There's a lot more research right now coming out saying even people, when Democrats are asked about Republicans, they think of extreme views. But in the reality, most people are in the middle. And how do you then get the people in the middle to talk about what we hear in media is the noise from the extreme? And then people start feeling like, oh my God, I need to take a camp. I need to do something. But in reality, we all exist with very human values in the middle. And we do need strong leaders to emerge. We need leaders to kind of remind people that how do we then bring the humanity back in our dialogues? And it starts from our classrooms. It starts from mental health setups where we are doing counseling. It really starts from the university at different parts of the university.
So, Rick, let's look at our takeaways on this and what we've learned. And I think one of the most important things I hope everyone takes away is this is complicated. It's extremely complicated. There is no one way. There is no silver bullet or something that you just do to fix it. It isn't a fix. It is absolutely a strategy, a mindset, and professional interventions as well as professional development. I think those are some key points that I'm taking away from this conversation. How about you?
I agree. I think I appreciate very much about the part about listening, about about adaptability. I think organizational change is something that, as Julia mentioned, we experience every day in our lives. And sometimes we push against that. And I think we're trying to, in these conversations, take really objective points of view and kind of looking at some of the issues and figuring out, well, what makes sense, kind of what's next, and how do we ensure that our community remains strong at a place like Stony Brook? As you wrap up, I was wondering if you each want to give maybe a quick minute, just any final thoughts that you each might have.
I think, as Julia said, like, our students are our backbone. They are the true reason why we exist over here. And we have a beautifully diverse community that knows how to come together. We are just there to support their growth. And they, as you said, they're ambitious, they're gritty, and they will solve our future problems.
Yeah, and I would also just add that I think in addition to all of the more political issues we've been discussing, of course, we haven't touched upon, perhaps this is going to be another episode of your podcast, all the technological innovations going on right now in terms of AI and how that's affecting education and our students. And so I would just also add that, these more interpersonal skills we've been discussing, whether it be the ability to listen, the ability to pay attention, the ability to express oneself and express oneself in a way that can be productive as opposed to merely contentious, I think will only become more important for our students, given the sort of extensive developments we've had in terms of the ability of AI to produce text. And so we're going to be relying less and less on text as we can sort of perhaps that'll be less of a signal of students' competence, so to speak. And these other skills, I think, will be much more important signal of competence, trustworthiness, etc., as we look to the future. So I think these are important skills, not only given our polarized context, but quite honestly, as a way to signal intelligence, competence, and capability. So I think our students are, this polarization in political context is important, but I think our students are facing a very interesting landscape out there. And it really is our responsibility to prepare them for that, which is a challenge.
Thank you, Julia. I think we have another episode that, yes, I was just going to say, add it to the list.
We're looking for topics.
Yeah,
so just, Julia and Smita, we just want to thank you so much for sharing your incredible insights and expertise today. It was such a fascinating conversation. Lots of opportunities, more for us to think about. And we just hope that you all, will continue to tune in. And we have another topic on social media and mental health that we'll be focused on as our next podcast. So hope you'll join us then. But for now, I'm Rick Gatteau.
And I'm Judi Brown Clarke, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunities.